The research report task is now available on Blackboard in the assessment section within the report folder. You will need to download both the task sheet and the Excel data file, as well as the criteria sheet that must be attached to your report when submitted. The aim of this assessment task is to give you the opportunity to apply the data analysis skills that you are learning to some real-life data. The topic this semester is student performance. Your task sheet gives some background information. You may also wish to do some general background reading to gain a better understanding of tertiary education within Australia. In relation to the data you will be analysing, there is one set of data consisting of 6 columns. The data can be found in an Excel file available for download near the task sheet on Blackboard. The dataset contains detailed information relating to 1,046 students. This data has been collected from BSB123 students in a past semester. The dataset includes the following variables: gender, double degree, which will be an answer of yes or no, quiz out of 20, report out of 15, survey out of 5, and exam out of 60. As a research officer, you have been asked to summarise, analyse and interpret the data. The task sheet includes quite a specific list of tasks which must go into the report. Okay, so let's start by looking at the overall structure of the report which you will prepare. There will be some more research report help recordings, and so we will have the chance to talk about the statistical aspects, but for the moment it is important to have an understanding of the report we are trying to prepare. It is important that your report is structured as a business report and appropriately formatted. You should therefore include a title page. When you submit your report to Assignment Minder, you will need to complete an Assignment Minder cover sheet to attach to your folder, and so this will include more detail. As such, the title page only needs to include a report title and your name and student number, but feel free to be a bit creative with the title page. The table of contents goes after the title page. So in terms of the report itself, well, where do we start? All good reports should have an introduction section, and so this is where we begin. The introduction is your opportunity to set the scene for the report, and so the first few sentences are likely to be in relation to the general topic. Maybe some background information followed by a sentence to explain why we are interested in the topic and therefore what the objective of the report is. The introduction should also include some specific details about the data you will be analysing, as well as a brief outline of the report structure to follow. A concluding sentence is always a good way to finish off a section. Overall, your introduction should be a small paragraph. While we might be tempted to then go straight into the full analysis, there is one more issue that should be dealt with early and therefore can be included as a section straight after the introduction. It will be only a fairly small section of the report, but it is important. Before we do any analysis of data, we should consider the possibility of outliers. As we have seen during the lectures, their presence can cause numerical measures to be distorted. The idea is therefore to consider the possibility of outliers before undertaking any of the other analysis, and an early section within the report is therefore logical so as to make clear that this analysis has been included and therefore to then clearly define the dataset that will be used for the remainder of the report. In terms of calculations, you only need to consider the possibility of outliers for the exam results column. If you do find any outliers, you will need to then think about whether to leave them within the dataset or remove them completely such that the whole row would be deleted. In the report, your outlier section will begin with an intro sentence, basically introducing the idea of an outlier and explaining why they need to be considered. You can state what data was tested for outliers and refer the reader of your report to an appendix with a summary of the calculations. State your findings, and if you do find outliers, you will need to finish off the section by saying what was done with any outliers, as well as the motivation behind the decision. In relation to the appendix, it can be fairly simple, and I would recommend including an intro sentence, maybe with the Z-score formula and a statement of the outlier rule. It would then be useful to include a small table showing some examples of the Z-score calculations. Having the outlier discussion out of the way, we can now go to the specific tasks and therefore the main sections of this report. While ultimately it is up to you to decide how to best order the tasks within the report, one structure idea would be to complete the main sections in the same order as listed in the task sheet. It is important to think about the overall structure of the report and if it flows logically. So starting off by thinking about the distribution of exam results. You will need to initially consider the distribution of exam results in isolation, which is one variable analysis. You will need to consider what factors may influence the exam result, but this will be completed within the following sections. Again, start with an introduction sentence to introduce this component, followed by a description of the data. You then need to include a histogram to visually show the distribution of results. Below, you would begin to discuss the key features. Generally, a good summary of features will include things like the average, standard deviation, lowest value, highest value, variation, and shape. It is also useful to note the modal class. The features then need to be put in context and linked to real life. A good concluding sentence for this section is to have a lead into the next section. For example, something like, in the next section of the report, factors which may influence the exam result, such as progressive assessment results, will be examined. And so moving on to those factors that may influence the exam result, the remaining section should contain several subsections. One to address each of the bivariate relationships being considered, and of course you'll also need to think about any possible extensions. The same structure template can be used for each of the subsections. For this part of the report, you are also looking to say which factors influence the exam result, and so for this type of comment, this type of comment can be a good concluding sentence for each subsection. Finally, we have the conclusion, so that will be your final section. As conclusions should be drawn within each section and subsection of the report, the final conclusion section will only be fairly small and is really just an opportunity to quickly recap on the major findings so as to remind the reader what they should be taking away from the report. No recommendations are required. Lastly, just a quick note about the appendix. So the appendix will be included after the final page with your conclusion section. I mentioned earlier that you would need an appendix for the outliers. Generally, this is the only appendix that should appear within your report, as anything important, including tables and charts, should appear within the report itself. If you do find that you have something extra that you want to include as an appendix, that is okay, but please keep in mind that the report should be able to be read without looking to any appendices, and so it is vital that all of your findings and conclusions go inside the report itself.